practice, and it is going to be more from a data perspective. We've been hearing this term AI, responsible AI, since the past 2 days a lot. Everybody is talking about it. But I think we must also talk about drive these conversations about how we can do it more responsibly. So I'm Shruti, and I'm a researcher with Sony Research. I'll briefly talk about some of the research we've been doing here in this space, and then we'll have some of our really nice and cool panel members join us and share their opinions. So while I wait for our clicker, I will tell you, and we'll begin. So at Sony, we've been asking this very fundamental question of what if fairness can begin at the data set level? Like, we talk of fairness, we talk of models, we talk of bias mitigation, but what if we actually start it from the data level itself? And over the past 2 days, you would have seen, we've seen a lot of human-centric applications being talked about. We've seen robots, we've seen healthcare, we've seen face, we've seen biometrics, and we know that human-centric AI is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, which makes us developing AI responsibly even more important. Now, what does responsible AI really mean, and what are we trying to do at Sony? So we started questioning what is ethical AI, what is responsible AI, specifically for human-centric terms. And what we realized is that we need to take care of certain key aspects. Something like consent. It is a non-negotiable. People are not talking about consent enough. If we have consent, we need to talk about consent revocation. So if someone is okay with sharing the data, and tomorrow they say that no, we don't want to share our data anymore, we want to revoke consent, there should be an option to do this, which is already being talked about, but it is not yet actually made practical or implemented. Globally diverse representation. This is again a non-negotiable. We need data to be as diverse as possible. We need copyright protection. We want to prevent unauthorized use. And the most important but very less talked about is fair compensation for everyone in the pipeline, be it people who are contributing their data, who are working with the data, who are annotating it. So fair compensation is another very important topic to talk about. And in order to address all these challenges, we came up with this data set called FHIBE, in short. It stands for Fair Human-Centric Image Benchmark. And it's the first globally diverse, consensually collected fairness evaluation data set for a wide variety of human-centric computer vision tasks. And when I say wide variety, I mean this is one data set which will let you do 9 different computer vision tasks from a single data set. So you don't have to go around running pillar to post, finding one data set for face recognition, one for person segmentation. This is one data set, you can use it. It has dense annotations. It is built in an ethical and robust manner. So what I mean by that is all data has consent, it is ethically sourced, it's fairly compensated. This is the first data set which is publicly available and GDPR compliant. Moreover, this is a data set which will enable you to do fairness and ethical evaluations. So it can enable you to diagnose bias. It will give you a large number of human-centric tasks you can work on, which I already talked about. And when I mean richer annotations, I mean that each image here has 40 plus annotations. Self-reported, quality checked by QA workers, quality checked by a bunch of researchers. And these annotations are specific to images, specific to subjects. They also capture environmental conditions, and they also capture the device information. So what camera, what focal length. When I say environment, outdoor, indoor, where is the light source coming from? And for like image specific, it's pertaining to the subject. So it's more like, what is my actual skin tone? What is my apparent skin tone? Do I have facial hair? Do I not have facial hair? And it's not a binary data set. So it has a lot of annotations which go into the specifics. So is it a goatee? Is it a goatee and mustache? Is it white hair? Is it blonde hair? Is it brown and black hair? So there's also an option to list multiple features in the annotation space, which makes lives for researchers also very valuable and important and easier, because we can then use this information to actually diagnose bias. What is the purpose of doing all that? Is that we release an open source data set which will enable people to actually do fairness evaluations. It's a first of a kind. Nobody has tried to tackle this problem where we are actually having a data set which is so dense, is GDPR compliant, is fairly compensated. So it's a blueprint for anyone looking to do ethical data collection. And of course, the reason why we all are here, it is fostering responsible AI. So it is to motivate people to talk about responsible AI, create awareness, and of course, start building AI more responsibly. This is a link to, like, you can download the data set, take a look, play around, scan the QR, and there's a link as well, which shares all the information. And now I will call upon some of our panelists on stage to continue this conversation of responsible AI, specifically in the data space, and how we can build AI more responsibly. Yes, so I will begin with Aprajita. Aprajita, thank you so much for joining us. She is a partner at AZB and partner specializing in AI technology, law, and data governance. She's qualified in India, England, and Wales, and New York, and has been recognized by Chambers and Legal 500 for her work in technology and law. Thank you so much for joining us. Next, we have Ankur from MasterCard. He's a VP at AI Garage MasterCard, and he leads the AI Center for Excellence at MasterCard for EMEA regions. And he has 20 plus years of experience in AI and building products. Thank you so much. And I think we can start now. We have one panel member who's stuck in traffic. We've all been there. So we will wait for him and introduce him when he's here. So I think I'll begin with a few open questions, and then we'll go on to more specific questions. So Ankur and Aprajita, both of you have been working with technology, in technology, with AI. And we've been hearing this term responsible AI, safe AI a lot over the past couple of days and maybe months as well. So in your opinion, how would you define responsible AI, and specific to your domain or more broadly, and what do you think are the key components in it?
Cool, thanks. Thanks for the question. So maybe I would like to correct you. People are talking about AI, not responsible AI. So for us, we operate in the financial industry domain. So since it has to do, all the matters related to money, so trust is the most important aspect, which we have to deal with. In fact, if I have to put it, what MasterCard does, so we, at MasterCard, we consider ourselves as the guardian of trust. So our business is to create trust in the financial ecosystem and then to preserve it on an ongoing basis. Now coming to the topic of responsible AI, how do we ensure that, whatever AI systems we are designing, developing, or deploying are responsible? So the things, it's the principle which we follow, it's called security by design. So we ensure all our AI systems, they are fair, A, they are transparent, B, there is some kind of accountability which has been assigned to different components. And then at the same time, these are compliant as well, compliant and secure. So maybe I'll touch upon all these 4 or 5 different aspects. First is fairness. So I need to ensure that all my models, like whether it has to do some kind of transaction approval or decline, or let's say, deciding for a loan application, it has to be fair. It can't discriminate between the customers on the basis of, let's say, race, ethnicity, gender, income group. So that's fair. Second is, it has to be transparent. By transparent, I mean, there has to be some explainability which can be associated with the decisions your system is making. In finance, every decision has got, has to have some kind of defensibles. For example, every customer, he has a right to know why his application has been rejected. There may be instances where regulator can come to you and ask for, certain decisions which you have made in the past. Maybe he'll come to you after a couple of years asking for, why did you do that? So things like those, you need to have proper explanation in place, and then there has to be some kind of audit trail which you can use at a later point of time. Third is around security, which is very specific and very relevant to the topic. So all AI systems, they feed on data. Like without data, data is the oil on which this entire machinery runs. So I need to ensure the data I'm ingesting is from the true source. The veracity has been verified of the data sources. I'm allowed to use the data. The consumer has given me the consent to use it for my model training. Then at the same time, I am the custodian of the data, so I need to ensure it is not being leaked anywhere. There is no cyber, cyber instance or cyber heist of my data. So that's also there. And at the same time, depending upon the domain or let's say country or region you are operating in, you also need to be compliant by some of the local guidelines. For example, in Europe, we recently had the EU AI Act. So I need to ensure that my AI systems are compliant to that as well. So this, in fact, I would say, if I have to summarize, AI systems are essentially scaled intelligence. Responsible AI is scaled intelligence with some, there is no bias, it is fair, accountable, and compliant to the regulations.
Thank you so much for your insights. I think you corrected me at the right time to say that we've been talking about AI, but it's also important to start.
People are waking up to realize the importance of responsible
we need to.
AI.
Aprajita, from your point of view, how would you define it?
I think, of course, I have a lawyer's perspective onto the AI conundrum. And I do agree with you both that, especially, I think in a lot of developing countries, including India, there is a lot of conversation about using AI and making it beneficial and really adapting it to absolutely any kind of business scenario. But even yesterday at the summit, I was on a panel where we were discussing port infrastructure. And they were talking about making it completely autonomous ports and making the shipping industry go completely autonomous. And for me, it's a very interesting conversation because you can, deploying autonomous AI tech onto a critical infrastructure is a very, very nuanced and complicated conversation, which I feel is not happening because the interest is more in let's adapt to it. So I think from a legal perspective, responsible AI is really building on to the kind of work that technologists like you and him have already doing, because I think there are many people who are engineers, who are technologists, who understand the tech really well, and they have figured out what should be the responsible AI critical elements at the time of model deployment or even at the time of building it. So I think there's a lot of discourse that has already happened. There's a lot of research. There is a lot of reliable information and methodology that one can adapt, including across diverse sectors like fintech, financial sector for him, for healthcare, and all the, the critical sectors wherein people have concerns about when AI is adapted onto it. I think for a lawyer, for me, what I have noticed is that the responsible AI conversation is failing to discuss what is going to happen when these responsible standards, let's say, become too automated, or there is an automation, lethargy as a result of humans simply depending on the automation process is a bit too much and forgetting to use, their own discretion or their own judgment when the tech is being used. Because when those kind of incidents start happening, in India at least, we don't really have any kind of accountability or any kind of remedies to protect users as well as companies. For example, if I am a hospital and I have an open source, some model that I'm using from some developer and I'm using it for my billing, for my prescription, for my all my kinds of the work that I do in my industry. If something goes wrong in that AI deployment, there are very limited means that are available both to B2B entities and also to users like us who would be impacted by that adaptability. So I think there needs to be more conversation as well as, I think, legislative amendment. We need to have laws, we need to have some sort of guidance on what would happen when it comes to accountability, especially in all these diffused AI models where there will be one entity that will come up with a responsible AI standard, but there's lack of clarity on which all entities that are part of that AI ecosystem are actually following that standard. Because it's very good for a bank to say that I have a responsible AI standard, but all your sub-vendors and your agencies, do they even know what you're following? And they are the ones who are actually going to deploy your model at a mass scale. And if there's an accountability issue, then we need to know who is responsible, whether you as the entity that's developing the model or the entity that's deploying the model. That as well as enforcement remedies. I think currently under Indian law, as I mentioned, we don't have any remedies in the event there is any negligence, there's any harm caused as a result of AI deployment. And in fact, yesterday I was speaking to a legal tech developer, and he was asking me that they're building this tool, for law firms and lawyers to use and get research answers and things like that. And he asked me that, how do you guys actually advise clients on what to do when there is a liability concern? Because he's like, because there are no cases in India. I said, yeah, there are none. So what we do is we read foreign case laws that are similar jurisdiction, like India is a common law country. So we try to see what's happening and then we develop an argument. And I told him that, well, the good luck is that we haven't had those kind of mass scale liability and infringement claims happening in India. But when it does, you will see a lot of people getting affected and there are going to be inadequate remedies under law. So I hope that, what happens once you deploy the model, there is a lot more conversation about that. Because I think there are a lot of smart people already aware of how to set up a model and launch it.
Thank you, Aprajita. So we have our last panelist. He's finally braced the traffic and he's here. Thank you so much, Dr. Mayank, for joining us. Yeah, so I think we can continue the conversation.
Let me apologize first. It's a really bad traffic.
But you are right on time.
So, Dr. Mayank, I was just asking the other panel members what, in their opinion, is how would they define responsible AI, and specific to their domain, what are the components or how do they define responsible AI? What does it mean for them? So we would like to hear something from you.
So I'm sure some of these things the panelists may have already talked. I hope I'm audible now. Okay, so everyone would actually start with data. I'm sure everyone would have talked about start with data, start with what about responsible models and all. I'll take actually one step before even data. Right? So think of the core design itself. Like we all talk about, and I've seen Shruti's post also, that it has to be by design itself. And when I say by design, like you have to talk about the problem statement. Like think of the responsibility at the problem statement definition level itself. Like, can I solve this particular problem responsibly? And that's where actually you start with, can I collect the data responsibly? Can I create a model which is a responsible model? Can I take the decisions which are responsible decisions? So if you actually go back to the root point itself, saying that, can I define the problem statement in a more responsible fashion? Probably that can then have a rainfall effect with respect to every component of AI or machine learning models.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your perspective, and I fully agree with you, and I'm sure like everybody in the room agrees with you about how we need to actually start thinking from the design level and not work in a post hoc manner. that, okay, now we've done this, now how can we make it better? We need to start asking the question, how do we make it better before we even start building it? But to your point, I know you work with students, you train the next generation of minds and people who are working in AI. So to that, do you think the current academic system adequately prepares the students to think about responsible AI beyond just model performance and accuracy and adaptation or thinking of applications? And are we training students to actually talk about data governance, trustability, security, safety, and just responsibility as a whole?
Actually, it's a very good question. When I was in IIIT Delhi, first time we started a new program on BTech in Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence. Jointly with IIT Hyderabad, that was India's first AI program at undergrad level. At that point of time, we did not think about it, right? But then subsequently, when I moved to IIT Jodhpur and I created another program there, an undergrad program in AI and data science, we started thinking about it. You know, students should not only know how to create models or how to evaluate models, they should also understand the basic principles of being responsible in terms of usage, even application usage, domains. You pick a particular theme and you explain that, you know, again, like when our work on face recognition, where we start with face recognition being fair and not fair, right? And when we talk about Indian context, it should not happen that someone coming from North India versus Northeast versus South India should not get misclassified because of their skin tone or the facial appearance. So these things we start teaching slowly. We have started teaching to students, and over the years I have seen that almost all the BTech programs that at least I have reviewed, they have a program on a particular course on dependable AI, trusted AI, or responsible AI, you name it, and these courses are there. In fact, this semester we have started a new course at IIT Jodhpur on MLDL Ops, where we are actually teaching them at design level, at operations level, how we can do a pre-hoc or a post-hoc responsible AI. So slowly things are going in that direction, and probably this Impact Summit is also making that particular statement that AI should be for the people, and therefore we have to be more responsible. So hopefully things will be more mature as we go forward.
That's good to know and very reassuring that we have the next gen of researchers actually thinking and learning about responsible AI from like the grassroots level. So that's good. But moving on to Ankur, at the same theme, do you think fairness, like how is it in the industry? You're working with MasterCard. Do you think fairness is ever traded off for model performance or deployment pressures, timelines? And
So
if
like,
tensions arise, how do you tackle them and how do you tackle conflicts?
yeah, sure. So first of all, I would like to enforce the point which Dr. Mayank just made. So when I started my career, so the only thing model governance team used to do is to do feature importance. Now you have a list of, let's say, 20 features. You need to go with a slide with the feature importance, and why do you think is the rationale for the, for the model to have picked that particular feature. So that's the practical explanation of the features which have been picked by the model based upon variable importance. So that was the only model governance we used to do like 20 years back. Now, as people are realizing, these systems, they are intelligent, but there can be some inherent bias in the data or the training method. So people are, realizing it, that it has to be done at the design level, which you highlighted. And I also highlighted, what we practice at MasterCard is security by design. So for your question, like, is it a hindrance at number of times, wherein you are under pressure to deliver your project, but at the same time you have been asked to do all these things, which may or may not bring that kind of economic impact. Okay, people are just, just worried about the economic value which is going to come out in terms of impact when you move ahead with the deployment of the AI product. So what we do at MasterCard, so we have got something which is called studio process. Now that process has got different gates. So gate 1 is when you are doing your due diligence. Okay, due diligence is what's the problem objective, how you are going to solve it, very basic questions. What are the data elements or the data sources you are going to use? Is there a possibility of having some kind of inherent bias in that data which can creep into your model and can affect the final result of that? So these are preliminary discussions but are very important, because many ideas, they got killed at this particular stage because of non-feasibility of that moving into production system, because there is some kind of non-adherence to the protocols or the guidelines. So that becomes very important, and this is not a topic which is only discussed at the time of doing the initial discussion, which is gate 1 we call it. This happens at every stage. So this is an ongoing I would say change in thought process. Earlier, model governance used to happen at the last step, like when you are done with doing all the data ingestion, creating data pipelines, training the models, doing all the due diligence, and then you go to the AI governance team. But now what happens is, now data strategy team, AI governance team, they are working with the data scientist and the product manager and the business people right from the word go. So this is now, teams are not working in silos anymore. It is, I can talk about the mature organizations, maybe some other smaller companies, they might be working in a different fashion, but they will also, get to that level once they scale. Because as we speak today, there are many companies, they still don't have any chief data officer. So this becomes a side hustle for someone else, some other C-level executive. Oh, he's chief AI officer and also the data strategy officer. But data strategy and data related due diligence is as important as any other associated field, I would say, as far as the final deployment or the final delivery of the AI systems is concerned. But particularly to your question, it's not a trade-off for us. Like if I have to meet my timely deliverables, then I need to plan for it in advance, and I need to ensure that I have all the governance approvals in place before the launch. So it's no compromise.
Thank you so much for your perspective and sharing how you do it at Mastercard. Aprajita, I'll bring you into the conversation. And we've been talking about how we do it in tech. Dr. Mayank told us how it's done in academic institutes. Ankur told us how we do it in large organizations. But you interact with a lot more people and you see a lot more cases coming from the background you have in law. What, according to you, is one thing which researchers and technologists often miss out on when talking about responsible AI?
I think there are, in my view, I think there are two things that obviously the market and the environment are very different, so there are many points of non-commonality, but I'd like to just cover two. And it's very heartening to hear, I think, the examples that Ankur was giving, because much of that is what we think should be an ideal, like a multidisciplinary conversation between lawyers, ethicists, technologists, as well as governance professionals who are in charge of running affairs of a company. So the number one thing that was missing for quite some time, and I think it's being slowly fixed, but we would obviously like to see it happen at a much larger scale, is the whole data governance issue. Because for quite some time in India, because we didn't have a very robust data protection law, it was quite common to essentially use a lot of public data for AI training. And we are seeing some litigation, taking place in India, for example, ANI versus OpenAI, which is based on this exact point. But so obviously AI training companies have relied a lot on public data, and that's the way they would like to proceed. But there is also a lot of personal and sensitive data that is used for data training purposes. Now that we have a more specific law, which is the DPTP Act, this law asks you to have consent. And I think that's where the kind of research that you've done, Shruti, is very interesting, because you're trying to address those kind of legal compliances within the kind of, the data quality that you're submitting. But in addition to having consent and proportionality and purpose limitation principles at the point of origin and collection, this law also requires that after 2 years, if I no longer want you to have my data, then you should have those facilities in place to delete it. And at least in my experience, barring the very top AI developers, there is one reluctance and two, ignorance about the fact that this compliance is a very real compliance in India. So yes, I think the data governance issue needs to be discussed at a more holistic level, because just because a technology makes it challenging to erase data after a certain point of time, that's not really, that's not really a response to a very active legal obligation that exists. And the second point that I want to cover is really about, in my experience, what we are seeing is that now a lot of CIOs, chief technology officers, they are suddenly being appointed in CEO positions. They are becoming board members. There are many small startup organizations where they don't want a CEO. They are more than happy to have a CTO, because if you have a very technology-ready organization, they feel that our product, our company is tech, and let this person run the company. I think there are a lot of concerns there, because currently the conversation that doesn't happen between lawyers as well as technologists is about governance and accountability. So just building on my earlier point, because today, for example, if you're a director in an Indian company, you don't really know that to what extent should you be aware of the kind of tech that you're using, what is the risk of that technology, do you have good downside protection in the event there's a different law that comes in. So this kind of conversation is very missing, because nobody wants to think about a future perspective. But I can tell you, in the legal fraternity, there is a lot of conversation that today, if you do an M&A deal, which is about an AI company, the kind of downside protection that one should have, and the lack of clarity on what exactly you need to protect yourself from and how much, is it scares a lot of people, because it's all, a lot of it is just very predictive and non-deterministic kind of conversations. So I think we'd like to see more awareness at a much larger scale about data governance, because your AI is really as good as your data. So it should start at that point. And subsequently to that, there should be a lot more conversation about the very real-time scenarios in which AI is being deployed. I think on Ankur's point, and Mayank's point as well, the fact is that you can develop an AI tech, but you are putting it in a very real organization where there are speed concerns, there are profitability concerns, there are shareholder concerns. And how do you really align that? Because no matter how responsibly perfect your product is, when you are you're debating between shareholder interests will always take primacy. So then you need to understand how that responsible index is really going to float when time is of essence and economic concerns are of essence, because that is actually how this technology is going to be used. And you need a more practical mindset, which steps away a little bit from the academic point of view.
Thank you so much for sharing your perspective. And I feel that's why it's more important to have more of these interdisciplinary conversations, not just in the CEO's office, but beyond, outside classrooms, discussion rooms, coffee chats, everywhere, so that there is more awareness around the kind of issues that come from a more legal perspective and policy perspective, and likewise, what are the concerns for technologists, which can be understood on the other side. So we need to have this conversation more openly to understand each other's point of view. But to your point, I would like to ask you, should responsible AI be enforced through regulation, or can voluntary frameworks suffice?
I think it's a combination. Certainly there is merit in India being a AI, a country that really wants to deploy, and it doesn't make sense to really stop innovation. For example, while EU has come up with the EU AI Act, there is already news coming in that they are thinking of amending the law. They have realized that the legal requirements there are so prescriptive that they would be left behind in the AI adaptability globally. So there is a reason why India has not, followed that approach. So I think the honest answer to that is it should be a combination, because when it comes to voluntary compliance and voluntary standards, we're already seeing so much good work from the private sector as well as the public sector. Content governance, model explainability norms, what kind of training boards should have, what should be the AI governance standards for people who are in positions of management. There is a lot of practices that are already being adapted in the market, and I think one should let the industry do that, especially when it comes to, I think, very rapidly adapting technology like Gen AI, because the technology itself is so accelerated in terms of its possibilities that the law can never really catch up, regardless of what kind of guidelines you come up with. So I would say that it's important to have voluntary compliance and allow the private sector to come up with their own standards in areas that are more technically focused. and audit and red teaming and these kind of criteria. But when it comes to high risk AI use, which is healthcare, financial sector, insurance sector, critical information system, it is important to come up with the law that provides some sort of accountability, which is building on my previous point. When you are adapting an AI system onto a particular sector, who is exactly responsible for what? And then we also need to update our law so that users like us who will be, let's say, experiencing this technology without knowing what is the data that's fed in, without having much awareness of the technology, they need to have proper legal remedies to provide them protection. So I think a combination of that would be good to see in India, because that will provide a more protective environment compared to what it is right now, which is very guidance and advisory based.
Thank you. So Aprajita mentioned Gen AI, and I think it's everywhere nowadays. We have it in our phones, and we are pretty much dependent on it. We use it like our personal assistants. But coming to Dr. Mayank, I would like to hear your thoughts on, given that foundation models are trained on massive and often very opaque data sets, can we meaningfully talk about responsible AI if training data largely remains undisclosed?
Yes and no. And then I'll explain the reason. In fact, you talked about DPDP Act and the right to be erasure. See, if a model is trained on a very large corpus of data, and we expect someone actually tomorrow coming and saying, hey, my data is being used. Let's say you have trained on traffic data, like millions and millions of samples from traffic signal, that the cameras that are there, and I know I have crossed this, let's say, crossing 5 times almost every day, so my data is there. Now, under DPDP Act, I can go and say, if you are able to recognize me, if you are using face recognition to recognize me, remove my data. So it's not only the removal of the data, it's the removal of that information from the model that has been trained on that particular data, right? So if I truly talk about responsible AI and implementing DPDP right to be erasure, this means that not only removing from my databases, like from the image sample sets, I have to also go to the model space and implement unlearning or forgetting aspects over there. So truly speaking, if I have to implement DPDP Act in true sense, I need to have the mechanism to unlearn these generative AI models, right? Now, if you think of how truly we can be in terms of being responsible, starting from data to model, it's a long way. We are not there yet. And the very first thing that we should think of is ensuring that the models that are being trained, in fact, a lot of models have been inaugurated in the last 2 days over here, right? But I did not see any model card or data card, right? No one actually said that here is my model, here is the model card, here are the data cards. Like on which data that we have trained, what is the property of the data, at least release that. So at some point of time, if we have to start thinking in a true sense, implementing being responsible, we have to start with the process of declaring that what kind of databases you have used. Here is a model card, and you have to standardize these model cards also. And that would actually help in the right directions towards being responsible in the development phases, be it generative AI, be it discriminative AI, or be it even agentic AI. Right? Means that's another Pandora box when we talk about agentic AI. And what do we mean by responsible agentic AI? That's like another probably panel altogether.
Yeah. Thank you, and I agree with you. I think model unlearning is pretty critical, but it all begins with knowing a little more and standardizing processes and data cards and model cards. Even though they do exist, I don't think a lot of people in the community use it very actively. So bringing the conversation back to Ankur. Ankur, you talked about processes at MasterCard and having conversations early on. So you're familiar with how, you've done it at MasterCard, where you have processes to enable more responsible AI. From your experience and perspective, how do you think India should position itself in shaping global responsible AI standards? rather than just simply adopting frameworks which somebody else comes up with.
Yeah, sure. So I think as far as regulations are concerned, so I believe that regulations should not throttle innovation. So there has to be a sweet point wherein, you are allowing the companies to do innovation, but within, with some kind of guardrails around it. For example, like Aprajita talked about, she is still waiting for some data-related cases to be filed in India, so that she can also build a business around it. But the thing is, our regulators, they also need to be proactive and at least have some umbrella guidelines to be followed for AI, responsible AI generic applications, and then things can change. For example, agentic AI, we are not ready for it. Yesterday only we demonstrated our capabilities to do agentic AI transactions. So the first question which most of the visitors were asking, what will happen in case I raise a dispute? Who will handle it? Let's say in case there has been a faulty purchase which has been made, or the item was found to be defective at a later point of time, who's responsible for that? My agent, merchant's agent, MasterCard's agent. So these all things, so like the rules of the games are yet to be defined and yet to be followed. At this point of time, most of the tech players, they are kind of readying the ground for the launch, but it is regulators' job to define like uniform rules which are applicable to all the participants in the ecosystem, and to ensure the trust which we have built over the years and decades, it still kind of follows the legacy, and people feel equally comfortable while interacting with agent, even even if they are not aware of these agents working behind the scenes, but they should feel comfortable about it. India specific things, we have a super DPI, digital infrastructure, but the thing is there are no guidelines on how to use it, and most of the things like the customers, the consumers, like who are ready to share that data without knowing the consequences, they also need to be sensitized about sharing their details. So in India, I have seen many people sharing their information over social media like that only, because they are not aware of the consequences, what kind of issues they can get into if they don't follow the data hygiene properly especially over social media. So this is one thing, we need to educate and sensitize the consumer side, when they provide their consent to their data to be shared and used in downstream processes. But at the same time, for the companies who are leveraging those data to come up with some kind of intelligence to learn certain aspects of behavior and monetize those, there has to be some defined framework for that as well.
Yeah, and I agree, but maybe Aprajita doesn't. I think there's always a cat and mouse game. We develop, we do research, and regulators are figuring out how to catch up, and then they come up with something, and then there's a pushback. So I think there's always that back and forth, which is really essential to actually research, innovation, as well as doing it responsibly. So before we close, I would like to hear from all of you if there's one major structural change, not just incremental, but structural change that must happen for responsible AI to move from principle to practice, what would that be?
So we have already started that process. We haven't started the actual implementation. Is introducing a course on artificial intelligence at class 11th and 12th level. I'm right now writing the textbook. I'm leading that particular effort for our NCRT. And our hope is that if the textbooks from class 11th and 12th starts teaching kids what AI can do, what AI can't do, and what is the meaning of ethics in artificial intelligence, probably we'll have right set of people to ask questions, to develop right set of tools and technologies, and use it more responsibly. So the basic, at least coming from academics, this is what we can do, teach from the basics itself. And this course is going to be available for every student who can, whether be it from art side or humanities or commerce or from science. So any student and every student would take this. Our hope is that about 2 crore students every year would actually be taking this particular course, and hopefully this will just elevate and have more such dialogues and discussions. I'm really glad to see that dialogues have started happening about being responsible and all. Probably with this one step that we are right now taking, that would actually increase the fast forward in that direction.
That's really amazing to hear. Ankur?
Yeah. So how about changing our job titles? Like from Chief AI Officer to Chief Responsible AI Officer, AI Scientist to Responsible AI Scientist. But jokes apart, this implementing responsible AI, it's a continuous process. Okay, it need not be like, one touch point at the end of the model development cycle or the deployment cycle. It is a continuous cycle, and it has to be made an integral part of the overall product development. That's one. So I'll go back to my definition, which I gave at the start. So responsible AI is nothing but scaled intelligence, which has got fairness, transparency, and trust.
Aprajita?
I think for me, the main thing would be that some of the principles, seeing them applied in practice and consequences if they're not followed. So certainly we look forward to having at least a definition of entities that are involved in an AI system so that there's more clarity, and then understanding that whoever is implementing responsible AI, who has to be hauled up if something goes wrong. I think, we look forward to at least some clarity in the law so that it gives, I think, comfort to, to students, to people in the sector, that there are some remedies in the event of mishap and harm.
Thank you so much for such an engaging discussion and sharing your thoughts. I think it is clear, Dr. Mayank again highlighted it, that responsibility cannot, like responsible AI cannot be retrofitted. It must be embedded in design. Prajakta told us that accountability must be clear. So that's one key aspect which has come up multiple times, and it's really essential. And like Ankur mentioned, responsibility must be shared. So it's no one person's job. It has to be throughout the pipeline at different stages. Thank you so much. And I would like to thank you all for joining us. We have Sony Research India's director and head here, and he would give you all a token of thanks from Sony's side. And please wait for a group photo as well.
So I would like to thank all the attendees and speakers of this session. पांच लोग हैं